In 2011, after the Jeep Commander was discontinued, the CEO of Chrysler said, "This vehicle was unfit for human consumption. We sold some, but I don't know why people bought it." Now, is that a little extreme? Maybe. I mean, if you've owned one or still have one, let me know what you think. Do you think it was unfit for human consumption? Anyway, in today's video, I'll be showing you the last few projects I did on my Jeep Commander before I sold it. So let's get to it. So today, I'm going to deal with the airbag light that I have on my Jeep Commander. So what caused this airbag light is that the front crash sensor, which would trigger the airbag, doesn't work anymore and isn't communicating with the car. So that means that we're going to have to replace that sensor up front. Now it's good practice before working on any component of the airbag system to just disconnect the battery and wait a few minutes. And the reason for that is that we want to prevent anything from triggering while we're working on the system. So coming up from the bottom, looking to the left side of the car, we can see the sensor right there, to the left of the radiator. Now, you'll probably notice that the two bolts are pretty rusty, and that's not super uncommon on Jeeps. Now it is a bit of a reach to these bolts from the bottom, but I'm going to show you how you can reach them from the top as well. Now there's another one of these sensors on the right side behind all these pipes. It's a little harder to reach, but fortunately I don't need to work on that one today. The sensor is located below the battery, near the radiator hose, so if you want to access it from the top, that's where you'll find it. So these are the two bolts that come off the sensor. In my case, one of them came off with a 3/8, and the other one I had to hammer on a 9mm socket on. And so I'm not going to reuse these because they're rounded off, they're soft, they're rusty, it's no good. So I went to Home Depot, I brought these along, and they are M6 by 1mm. So I got a 2-pack for $1, and these are going to be mounting the new sensor on. Now I actually ended up removing one of the bolts from the top and the other one from the bottom. Because I had to hammer on the socket onto one of the bolts, I actually ended up pulling off the fan shroud and moving it down just so I had better access. But you shouldn't have to do that if your bolts are in good shape. If you do, there's two bolts, one up top here and then one below it, here and there. Same thing on the other side, but on this side you'll have to be aware of the dryer for the AC system, which the bracket is inside the ear that holds the fan shroud. So just be careful. And then there is also a connector down there that connects to the fan that you might want to unplug. Just be careful. Hopefully you won't need to deal with it. So the sensor is right there. So I've pulled it off its mount, and you can see the gray connector there. And so I'm going to get under there to pull it apart. There's a little red tab you might be able to see, and you're going to want to pull that away from the sensor. And that should let you take it apart. So this is the sensor, and you'll notice there's a little arrow, and that goes towards the front of the vehicle. So this side was against the radiator core support, or the frame, and the nuts come mount on here. It should be keyed. It looks like there's a little nub that'll slot in. If you try to put it in the other way, it won't fit. So, but yeah, the arrow will help guide you. So I have a replacement part right here. For the connector, once you pull the red tab out, you're going to push in and pull it off the connector. You might want to do that before removing it from the truck, and then unbolt it. That's the sensor, and then you can see the little connector, which is keyed, so it'll only plug in one way. Obviously you want the plugs part of the sensor to be facing down towards where the connector goes. Then you can reach in, pop it in, and then you'll push that red tab on the back inward to lock it in. The nuts are torqued to 9 Newton meters, which I believe is 80 inch-pounds. you're done. So after a lot of frustration, I'm happy to say I finally got the connector back on. So the issue I had is that the sliding latch ended up jamming because of, I guess, dirt collecting over the years. And so I sprayed it with contact cleaner and silicone lubricant, which allowed it to move. So then finally I was able to snap it in, and I'm going to see if it works. I also torqued it down again to make sure everything was good. Got the okay. Now let's reconnect the battery and check if the error code is gone. So already I haven't even connected the scanner, but you'll notice the airbag light is gone. That's a really good sign. Let's give this a check. There's a lot of errors in this that are due to the radio install. A lot of modules communicate with the radio, and then they're not happy. This is a stored code. It should reset. I'm gonna clear these, erase codes. Okay. Clear codes. Lost communication with radio. So many modules have this issue if you change your radio in this car. But our error is gone. No powertrain issues. See, look, all this. Mechanical instrument cluster. That's the dash. Same thing, see? Lost communication with radio. It's just a thing. Fortunately, that doesn't throw in a check engine light, so yeah, we are done with this. So to remove the grill, you gotta remove this cover piece. And to do that, you can pop up the centers of these clips. I'm gonna do one over here. Just gently try at the center. Pull out this pin and put it aside. I mean, the whole pin is supposed to come out, so just be careful. And there are 6. So once your 6 pieces are out, your pins, clips, just pops out. So the way it connects is there's 4 clips here, so you can pull it up towards you and back up. So the reason I'm removing this is because this part of the grill is missing 2 of its fins. And I have a spare grill that has the complete insert, so I'm gonna plastic weld in a replacement part here. All right, and that's how you remove the grill. It's pretty straight. It's really straightforward. You only need a screwdriver and to be careful. Here we have the repaired grill. As you can see, it has all its fins, specifically these outer 2 right here that we're missing. And to fix that, what we did was plastic welded it. So we separated the black plastic, which is the top part, and the fins from the painted part of the grill out front, which is chrome on some other cars. And then using plastic welding and plastic staples, first we cut out a replacement piece from a grill from the junkyard, and then cut out a broken part from this grill, and then welded it in. So the way you weld it in is you can use plastic staples, which is essentially a piece of wire that you melt into the plastic between the 2 parts you're joining. And that gives it some structure, and then over that, plastic welding with adding plastic material to fuse it together and add some strength. So nice and sturdy now. So here you can see this part was cut out and then rejoined with the replacement piece. So plastic welding is on this side, the staples are inside, under the plastic that's added in. And on the other side of the black plastic part was also plastic welded for structure. So yeah, take your time if you're ever going to attempt something like this. The grill part material did become pretty brittle over the past 15-16 years. But you know, just tacking in some plastic or glue to hold it together will be good when you reassemble it. But yeah, I'll be making a video at some point with tips and tricks on plastic welding, and now I'm gonna get to reinstalling this. So to reinstall the grill, we got the tabs on the bottom that are gonna slot back in to the front of the car. The tabs here, there's 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they go in above the bumper. Here, 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 and here. And those don't snap in, they just slot in. And then grab this, angle it towards the front a bit to line up the tabs, and then slide it forward. Let's find its spot. And then we have our little pins. So you don't want them to be out like this. And so this piece here is going to squeeze in. And once you push it in, the center shaft is going to push them apart and hold it in place. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is how it'll look pushed in. And as you can see, it prevents it from squeezing in. So when you're removing it, you push in like a screwdriver or a trim tool, pull the center part out, and that allows you to squish the parts and let it slide out. Just gonna, and then you've got your tab broken up. Just pop it in, and it's attached. The last one here. Put it in, pop it in, and then your grill is attached. As you can see, nice and sturdy, and you're all good. Don't forget, if you have any tools, make sure they're out of the way before you close the hood so you don't dent anything. And it's all good. Yep. And that's how you replace your grill, or reinstall your grill. Here's a 19. Now to remove the caliper, we're going to remove 2 bolts. These are bolts that also act as slide pins. And then once that's done, we'll be able to slide the caliper out and hang it up right here. So this is a 13. Pivot it out, pushing on this spring. Out. You can hang it up here. Okay, now. These discs are in really good shape, because I did them a couple years ago. Now the best way to service the parking brake is actually to remove the hub, which also pulls the axle out, but if you don't want to do that, you can actually do it with the hub in place, which is what I'm going to do. So here I've removed the spring on this edge. I'm going to work on removing that. Then we're going to remove this main spring, and then the 2 clips on either side. Top and the bottom. I have replacements for all this stuff. I've got a hardware kit right here. So for the clip, I'll push this down so that the point part can fit into the bigger hole, and then you can get it out. Okay. Sturdy, huh? Okay. Not bad in here. Needle nose to grab it. Turn it. It's on. Yes. What I ended up doing, mounting this clip while the shoe is higher up, and then yanking it down. I'm gonna have to clean this up a little bit. Next is putting the spring back in. I went and bought a drum brake spring tool, and this should help me install this spring because it has to stretch over 1 inch, and I cannot do that very easily on my own. Now, I know this isn't how this tool is supposed to be used, but sometimes you just gotta make do with what you have. Okay, that seems to be in. And it's gone. Okay, great. I was able to pull it down to hook it on and then tap it in. So now, so do the smaller spring on this side and put the adjuster in. So next step, once that spring is in, is to put in the adjuster. So I'm gonna actually lubricate this with white lithium grease, which I usually use for anything that's metal on metal. I'll use this, and anything that's plastic lubricant, I'll use silicone spray. There we go. Drop that in here, and we are installing this in here. So as you can see, there's a groove here, and on the top, same thing, and we're gonna place it in there. And then there are 2 slots here, and there's another one in there, and that's where our small spring will go. We're bringing this down to a small size. And so you want to make sure these grooves slot onto the pad, the pad guys. And the adjuster should be on the top on this side so that you can access it through the opening that's on the back. And then a little spring here. This one's not nearly as strong as the other, so I'm gonna use a needle nose. Push that down. So that's the spring, which is not actually in properly. Okay. So with everything back in place, our next step is to adjust it. So where we're gonna do that is with this wheel here. So I'm starting off with it fully in, but with by turning it this way, which is gonna be pushing it from the outside in on the back using a tool like this, or a screwdriver. I'll be able to push out the shoes until they touch the disc, and then back it off after that. And with that, you don't want it to rub while you're driving, but you want it to be close enough that it'll clamp securely when you pull the parking brake. So you can do this with the wheel on the car or off the car. I'm gonna get it just about lined up with just the disc, and then I'll put the wheel on, put the caliper back on, and put the wheel on and double check. All right, let's see. How much adjustment do I have to do to put this disc back in? Okay. Seems good. Now it's time to put the caliper back on. The brake caliper, the top part goes in first. You catch these in, and then you can slot that in. The spring will hold it. There we go. And then we're gonna put the screws back in. And we'll torque these down to 44 Newton meters. Wow, first try. Do very lightly. Now you can come around the side here. And you can see the opening there, and that's what we're going to use to turn that adjuster. So I'm going to work on that, and I'm going to listen for it to see if it rubs, and when it rubs, I'll back it off. That'll be good. I can test it too. And then once that's done, I'll put the little cover back on to prevent dust from getting in there. That grabs. Sounds good. Now we're going to do transmission fluid change, and I'm going to do it from the top because there's no drain plug on the transmission fan. Maintaining the right fluid level is really important for proper operations. If it gets a little low, for example, especially when it's cold, you can get slippage when you're shifting, and you want to avoid that. Let's pull the fluid out. I'm going to use one of these vacuum pumps, and there's the same type exists with the manual pump. So this connects to my air compressor here, and then we've got a hose that's going to go down the dipstick tube into the transmission, and that is right here on the Jeep Commander. A little plug here, and this is the right next to it, the oil dipstick. Got a little plug here. Now you can get a dipstick that's going to fit in here, and based on temperature, you'll be able to know how full it is and if you need to fill it up. So it can be tough in the winter to get it up to the temperatures needed to read, and it's kind of finicky to read, at least with the one I have, but it's very useful to have if you're having any transmission issues. Okay, and when it stops, you can turn it on. So once it stops flowing, where you're going to see like a very fine stream, mostly mixed with air, you can check how much you got out. In this case, we got about 2 2/3 liters. So it's about 2 2/3 quarts. You can see right here. And that's what we're going to start putting back in. Grab my hose back out. And then I have a angled funnel here that fits nicely. I'm gonna probably fill 2.5 quarts pretty confidently, and then once that's done and I go out to drive it, I'll get it up to temperature and then just get it up to just where it needs to be using the dipstick. So when you're filling up fluids in your car, like oil or transmission fluid or whatever else that comes in bottles like this, a good tip is to pour like this instead of like this, because when you pour with this side towards the bottom, it's going to rush out and it's going to be more irregular stream when you start, but you're going to get more control with this at the top. So it'll start pouring out much later and a much slower rate, so you can adjust based on what you need. So, yeah, let's get to it. Makes a smoother stream because it doesn't just want to rush out and there's no air bubbles. we go, about 300 left. That's about a third left. Okay. So the fluid topped off. Next step, well, I'm going to be doing oil change and a couple other things, but next step, if you're just doing the fluid change, is to go for a drive, get it up to temperature, get the chart that matches the dipstick that you have to check the level, because you have to get the temperature of the transmission fluid up to a certain level to actually test it. This can be kind of difficult in the cold weather in the winter, like when you're below freezing, but most of the time it's no problem. You may need an OBD2 scanner to do that, because that's going to be one of the only ways, at least in this truck, to know what temperature your transmission is at. Now typically for this transmission, if you drop the oil pan, it would be about 5 liters. If you do a full transmission drain, it would be 7.7. But here I was able to take out almost 3. I'm going to put that back in, but I'll be double checking to make sure I wasn't low beforehand for whatever reason. Okay. So as our first step, we're going to remove the pan, or the guard. So I got my handy 13. Okay, so for the fronts, just push it up, forward, and drop it down. And this will allow you to put it back on like this and pull back. That way it's partially supported. Take this off. You can see, a little dirty, but not too bad. Put that aside. And now we have good access to the oil pan. Let's see the drain plug. Now, fun fact about this oil pan, the OEM Mopar bolts that were new in bag, one of them broke while torquing it down to the spec. So use that information how you will. It's I don't know, it's colored my opinion of the brand. I'm gonna go idle the truck a bit before I open things up, and I'll be right back. Okay, so with the truck warmed up, I'll get my catch pan ready. Now, in this case, since it's angled towards the passenger side, I want to make sure that my catch pan is set up so that if this shoots out further out, I don't make a huge mess. Nice. Now with the oil drained out, it's time to button it back up and just tighten up the drain plug and torque it to spec. Now because this is an aftermarket oil pan, I don't have the actual torque spec for this. This is because the original oil pan was replaced because the gasket was leaking shortly after I got the truck. And we're back at the top, and it's time to change the oil filter, which is located right here, right behind the belt. Now I definitely recommend having a catch pan underneath because oil will drain out. This is a 76mm 14 flange filter socket. And let's turn it out. Now you can do this with all sorts. I wasn't able to get a good grip with my strap wrench, but I also didn't try very hard. You can also get the grippy types, the ones that auto adjust to it. Some people like to stab it with a screwdriver. It's a little messy, but I actually have a set of a bunch of sizes of these. It's a good way, especially if whoever put it on previously put it on way too tight, which is not the case here because I'm the one who put it on last time. It just, things tend to get a little tight with time. So I'm gonna keep unscrewing it. it out. Shit. A little more oil is going to come out of the engine there. Don't forget your filter is going to be full of oil because it is facing down, so be careful not to spill it. You can see here, that's where the oil collects and then drips out. So that's the cash can. So you're gonna want to make sure that you kind of keep this a little cleaner. I'm gonna wipe it out because it's certainly holding oil, and just wipe it out best you can so it doesn't get super grimy. So you're just gonna collect a bunch of stuff. There's also like a little scoop shape on the engine block. You can wipe that out. It stops oil from dripping onto the block itself. And before you put your new filter on, put a little bit of oil. Usually you want to try to use fresh oil. I'll lubricate the gasket. Okay. So don't use a wrench to install it. It's definitely going to be too tight if you do that. Just get it nice and snug by hand. Okay, perfect. And that's the oil filter. Okay, so now it's time to fill it up with oil. So this is the 3.7 liter V6 from Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and it happens to take exactly 5 quarts. So that's pretty convenient because that's one big jug. So I'm putting in 5W30 full synthetic. You can use your preferred brand. This isn't the fanciest, but it'll work just fine. First step is to remove the oil fill cap. Pretty chunky guy on this car. And I've got a funnel. It's a pretty big opening, but I still prefer to use a funnel to make even less of a mess. Just pour it smoothly. Let that get in there. I'm gonna double check my oil plug. Looks good. Don't pour too fast, otherwise it might overflow from the... This cap is a drop down and turn, so when you're taking it out you gotta be able to unscrew and it'll stop and then you pull up. There's a notch. Snugs up, and that's it. That's the oil change. So to refurbish the headlights, I'm going to be using this headlight restoration kit. So it comes with this blue attachment for a drill. It's a foam attachment. We'll polish it. And the plastic clearing polish. So I'll start off by shaking it real good. And you'll also notice that I applied masking tape around the headlight to protect the paint. I'm going to attach this to my drill. And so what we're going to do is put a little bit of polish on here and then spread it around, and then we're going to work our way across. So you don't want to stay too long in one spot, so you don't want to damage the plastic, and you don't want it to fling everywhere because it can be a pain to clean up. So it's pretty straightforward. Just keep it moving. And yeah. So. With a microfiber, you can wipe it off and check your progress. So you're going to make sure that the plastic part of this doesn't rub on the lens, so you don't want to scratch it. And also don't push too hard because there's some flex in this lens. Okay, I'm gonna work on this a little bit. Turn signal. It's not perfect, it's a little better. I can definitely feel a little bit of roughness still, but it looks like it's just from the age of the headlight. I'm gonna work on the other one for a little bit. Let's compare a little bit. Pretty clear. It's better, still a little hazy here. A little bit everywhere. There's some probably impact or something. You can see a little bit here. But on the other side, definitely more hazy. Yeah, you can tell the difference. It feels rougher. So. So you can really feel as you're doing it, this is relatively rough. It gets much smoother as you work on it.
Now if you're polishing your headlights and you want the best result possible, really the way to do that is to wet sand the headlight, then polish it and seal it, which I'll actually show one day on this channel, but it won't be on this car. Now one thing to note is that in my garage with all the bright lights, all the imperfections look a lot worse than they are when you look at them outside, so that's something to keep in mind.
You can kind of see this is still a little hazy and you can feel it, but here is better. It certainly is an improvement, but I have to see if doing more will actually make a difference or if I need to consider other options to really get it super clear. For the fog lights, it's the same thing. You start off a little hazy, put tape on to protect the paint. I'm gonna start slow, apply it, and speed up. Obviously, some of it's not gonna come out because you know, it gets hit by rocks, little actual scratches, but we want to reduce the haze on it, and that's already looking better.
And that's how you do a basic headlight polish.
I'm under the car right now, under the Jeep, and I'm going to be getting things ready to undercoat. So really the body's in pretty good shape. So I'll have to decide what parts I want to do. Definitely going to do this cross member, and then further back there's more things like probably this area here. Just recover that. This has been core sealed. And then maybe the diff here. And these parts. This seems to be the area where the car had the most visible issues. And even then, it's not that bad. So I'll just repaint this. It'll look better. Maybe the axle too. Make that look a little better. Or even then, it's just patches, like this area, but like everything else is, a lot of it's just like that. Got a full-size spare. So, generally, pretty good. This part's a little rough, but it just needs a good coat. Okay.
I undercoated it working from the back to the front in all the areas that I talked about earlier. And yeah, so should protect the car for many more years.
Replace this alternator, which is, as you can see, cracked right here. We're going to start by taking off the serpentine belt. And that's going to be done by pulling this tensioner here. And we're going to pull it towards the center of the car. And this is it's a 15. So now I have one Harbor Freight serpentine belt tool and a 15mm socket on it. Pop that on. And then bridge it out. Pull the belt forward and then slowly release it so I don't damage the tensioner. Now I don't necessarily need to take the belt all the way off, but I'm going to anyway, so I'm gonna take a picture real quick so I know where the routing is. So now this is off. Work it forward here, like this. And just pop this over here where it's safe, out of the way. So I've disconnected the battery terminal. And to remove the alternator, we've got 3 bolts. We got one right here, one right here, and one right here. And we have to remove, there's also a nut right here that connects to the battery positive, and in the back here there's a little connector. I'll show you that on the replacement alternator for the battery positive. The connector is right here. So the 2 front ones are 15. Double check. Yep. Yep. And the top one is a 13. Now before we do that, I'm gonna pop this connector off. Okay. Stuck this under the air box. This here is what we'll have to remove to connect to the battery positive. Okay, that's a 13. All right. We can disconnect that, and then we have to reach inside there, pull it back.
Now, obviously, this would be easier to do if I had removed the air intake, but I didn't really want to. Another option is to remove the bolts from the alternator and pull it forward so you have better access, which I thought of later.
Lots of threads. And a short one, long one on the left, medium one on the right, and the thinner one in the back. Since this
straddles the side of the engine,
this will pivot, but this has to be lifted up. So wiggle it up a bit, up and over. Maybe, maybe not. Nope. There we go. Okay, now I have access to the connector. There we go. Perfect. And that's our alternator out. Get the back one. Thread on the top nut. The top one is 12 Newton meters or 108 inch-pounds. There you go. It's not very tight. go, squeeze it a bit. We might have to wiggle this a bit, bring it up, so this can get through. With that done, all three of these, the two 15s on the front and the 13 on the side, are 40 foot-pounds or 55 Newton meters. You're going over this, under this, above the alternator, around water pump, to the harmonic balancer, around this idler. We won't hang it on this yet because we have to use this tensioner, and back up over here. Okay. You want to do this with clean hands so that you don't get anything on your belt that could cause issues. Okay, so once everything's lined up, I have over, under, over, around the idler. You're gonna wanna reach this inside the belt, pull it in, slide the belt on, make sure our belt is centered on every pulley, and then slowly release it, and we have our belt back on. Get that done. Our fresh alternator and our belt routing done. Everything looks good. Awesome.
And what's not so awesome is that this junkyard alternator got really hot when I ran the car, and I had to do the job all over again with a fresh one. But same process.
And secure, and that's it. That's the alternator job.
Yes.
So a relatively common issue with these trucks is that the rear headrests won't latch, and that's caused by the mechanism that's built into the back of the seat. So one thing you can try before you start taking anything apart is to run a lubricant or an oil or PB blaster even down alongside the frame of the headrest, and then work it until it will latch. And then, just so you know, the mechanism that holds it is housed in here, and there's a cable that runs to the side right here. Now this automatically actuates once it reaches a certain point further down. So yeah. If you can't get it to work from the top, you can remove the rear panel, which is right here. So this actually has a trim piece built in. It's gonna clip in up here through this. And then alongside the edges, there is a number of clips. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you're gonna wanna be careful because some of them can snap. So you can also order replacements online. Since this issue is a pretty common problem, having some of these on hand if you plan on having your truck long term is a good idea. On the middle row, you have a similar issue that can happen, and really a similar way to access it. Removing the back panel that has 2 screws, and then it would have clips as well, and a very similar, like probably the same type. You can also try lubricating the mechanism from the top as well before doing anything. Now, if you have to remove the back to get better access here, you can release these, the seat cover trim. These will clip in, so you'll be able to pull it off and out to get access from the top. And if you need a little more, you can remove the seat belt guide out of the top, and that's 2 screws as well. And this is with the screws towards the front. And there's a slit in it so you can get the seat belt out.
And then you can just push the seat cover and the foam forward if you need to look at the cable.
Okay, yeah. So you can reconnect all the edges of the seat cover. You got the main one here, the little one up here. on this side. And we have these two here. This one over here. And then 3 on this side. And then one more right here. And that secures this. And you can see the rest will be held with the pins. So it's all good, everything's lined up. And on the bottom we also have, I guess there's 5 hooks, but only three places where they hook into. I wonder if that's because of another car. Oh, that's cool. Look, when you pull the seat up, you'll see the latch automatically pop out, and it also retracts automatically further up, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, they spent money engineering that instead of finishing off the metal so you don't get metal splinters.
Yeah. Take these out. Oh yeah. Pull that up. Slot it in. Around. You got 2 pins here. I'll just line it up first. Release it to get better access. Alright. So, put some new pins in. They're a little shorter, but they should work. So this is the whole set. Okay, there's the black ones here. This might have been off already because there were 2 types of pins. You got the opening for the handle, so we're going to start with that. So pull that through, we can push this forward a bit. Because we have to slot this down beneath the trim here. And then line this up at the top. Push it all the way down to get the bottom ones. Wow. Ooh, there's a staple in there.
Good old Chrysler.
Okay, it's just through the thing right here. Facing outwards.
Wonder how that happened.
I also don't want to rip this thing. There we go. That's all staple, just facing outwards.
Thanks, Chrysler.
No, it's probably not big enough.
Okay.
But we can access it. So this is too small.
I'll get a bigger one.
So for 2 of the broken clips, we got some Dorman 963 518Ds, which are actually Honda parts, but they fit well and they hold the panel in place. So the last step is to reinstall this. It'll only fit one way, with the hooks this way. Just push that in. And you're all done. And that's how you fix the headrest. The fun fact about this car is a winter car. You know, has all-wheel drive, good suspension travel, no problems there. But if you notice, the front door, usually on cars, the seam will be here, or the split. But on the Jeep, it's over here. So in the winter, when it gets really icy, this freezes and freezes the door shut. So if you don't have a de-icer in the trunk or something, you might be stuck for a little bit. So
You can do what we normally do, which is just stick an ice pick in there and then bang on the door until the ice picks.
yeah, or going through the trunk. Yeah, but just something to know if you're thinking about getting one of these. So if you're thinking about getting one of these and you're okay with dealing with Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge products, and you think it looks cool, or you don't care that it looks weird if you think it looks weird, something to know is that it can be tough to get parts for it, because this was produced from 05
to 2010, so it's only 5-year run, I guess 6. So a 6-year run, and you're gonna have to go to junkyards to get certain parts, because some of the stuff you can get on eBay, like door handles, but anything that's trim, it has to be off another car. If you're like this car, which has the factory reveal color, which is pretty cool, and also the light khaki interior. The light khaki is a rare interior, and finding matching colors for your interior, like, it's expensive. I mean, a replacement steering wheel was $200, at least $200. Yeah, so, you know, keep that in mind.
You'll be building an entire truck out of junkyard parts.
Yeah. If you want this truck, another option is the Jeep Grand Cherokee, which is the same thing without the look, if you really must have a Jeep from that year range. Other particularities, I mean, one of the best parts of it, in my opinion, is the rear sunroof. I mean, you can't really beat this. Like, look at that. Backseat, Safari, windows. The only thing this truck is missing on the interior is the automatic climate control and the rear seat entertainment. I think that's all. The V6 has the most basic all-wheel drive system that they offered, and which is fine, works well. But on the V8 options, you had more advanced all-wheel drive capabilities. So, you know, for the two V8s, there was the 4.7, which is just a longer version of the 3.7, and not a great engine at all. And you had the Hemi V8, which is, you know, it's a Hemi, it's fine. And then if you're in the UK, you had an option for a diesel too, so if you're particularly enterprising, you can try to import one of those. It was a Mercedes OM642 diesel, which is, you know, it's Mercedes, is going to be a good engine. Oh, if you do get the V6, don't worry, you get just as bad gas mileage as the V8s, because it is a pretty heavy truck. Why am I getting rid of this for the Volvo? Well, the Volvo is a really safe car, which is nice. It has exactly the same power and torque, however, the torque is available at 1500 RPM as opposed to 5000 RPM, so it's actually really usable. And the gas mileage is, you know, low to mid 20s, whereas this is mid to high teens. So it got really windy after this, and the footage became unusable because of it, so I'm switching over to voiceover with more pictures of the truck. After I first got the truck home, we had to dry it out because the sunroof drains got clogged from being parked under a tree for a while, and that means that all the water leaked into the truck and soaked the carpets. So we dried it out over the course of a week with dehumidifiers and the carpet vacuum. After that, we did brakes, new tires, we had to put a new muffler in because that had rotted out. Also, we put in an aftermarket radio that had Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, and added steering wheel controls, and also added a backup camera. I replaced the ignition switch because that was starting to go bad and you had to jiggle the key to even get it to start. I fixed the rear headrests. I also replaced the radiator, transmission cooler, and AC condenser. The transmission cooler was leaking and that is integrated into the radiator, and just did the condenser while it was in there. Put in LED headlights, a dash cam, did the undercoat like you saw, all the interior door handles because those just fail and then you can't open the doors. And replaced the third brake light, which also integrates the rear window washer. That's a pretty cool feature. And then one last thing was the trunk struts because they were a little weak. Something that became a big job was the oil pan. So the oil pan looked like it was seeping oil through the metal. It might have just been the gasket, but that's what it looked like. So we got to work to remove the oil pan. So the way the oil pan is set up on this truck is that the gasket is also the windage tray, and that is bolted to the engine block. But the gasket fuses the oil pan to the engine, and so you can't just pull the oil pan off. So you have to drill through the oil pan, unbolt the windage tray gasket, and then pull it down. We managed to do that, no problems. And then with fresh bolts for the oil pan from the dealership, we were putting them all in, and one of them snapped while torquing it to spec, which is not great. So after drilling that out, we were able to put in an easy lock, which lined up perfectly, fortunately, and then put everything back together. So yeah, big job. Overall, it's a cool looking truck. I think it's pretty cool. It's not very fast. It's pretty heavy for the V6 especially. And, you know, I'm replacing it with the Volvo because it's a lot easier to get parts for the Volvo. It was made for a long time. You know, I think 2000 to 2012, as opposed to just the 06 to 10 on the Jeep. And that wraps up this video. If you love or hate the Jeep Commander, let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.